Welcome to the channel, The Coin Merchant. What if the change in your pocket could secretly make you a millionaire overnight? Most people walk past pennies without a second glance, tossing them into jars or leaving them on the counter, never realizing that one specific penny from 1970 could be worth an absolutely staggering $31 million. Yes, you heard that right, $31 million for a single Lincoln penny that might be hiding in your collection, your grandparents' attic, or even that old coffee can in your garage right now. Now, before we dive deep into what makes this 1970 Lincoln penny so incredibly valuable, I need you to stick with me until the very end of this video, because what I'm about to reveal about the coins coming up next will absolutely blow your mind. We're talking about pennies from the 1970s and 1980s that have shattered records, made ordinary people extraordinarily wealthy, and continue to hide in circulation today, waiting to be discovered. One of those coins has sold for over $50 million, and another has a story so incredible that even the most seasoned collectors were left speechless when it surfaced at auction. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's talk about this 1970 treasure first. The 1970 Lincoln penny represents a fascinating chapter in American numismatic history, a time when the United States Mint was producing billions of coins to meet the demands of a booming post-war economy, yet somehow, in the midst of all that mass production, certain errors slipped through quality control, creating specimens that would become the holy grail for collectors decades later. Now, to understand why this particular penny commands such an astronomical price, we need to travel back to 1970, a year marked by cultural revolution, technological advancement, and significant changes in coin production methods. The Philadelphia Mint, along with the Denver and San Francisco facilities, was churning out pennies at an unprecedented rate, but it was during this high-volume production that one of the most significant minting errors in American history occurred. The 1970 Lincoln penny that's worth millions isn't just any ordinary penny, it's what collectors call a double-die obverse error, combined with an extremely rare S-mint mark variant that was never supposed to exist in that particular composition. Here's where it gets fascinating, and I mean truly fascinating. During the die-making process at the San Francisco Mint, a misalignment occurred that caused the design elements to be struck twice, creating a doubling effect that's visible to the naked eye, particularly on the words "Liberty" and "In God We Trust," as well as on the date itself. But that's not even the rarest part. What makes this specific 1970 S penny worth $31 million is its unique composition. You see, in 1970, the San Francisco Mint was primarily producing proof coins for collectors, struck on specially prepared planchets with a mirror-like finish, but somehow, a small number of pennies were struck on experimental planchets made from a bronze-aluminum alloy that was being tested for future coin production. This wasn't supposed to happen. These experimental planchets were meant to be destroyed, melted down, never to see the light of day, but through what can only be described as a perfect storm of human error and oversight, several of these pennies escaped the facility and entered circulation. Now, you might be wondering, how do I identify this coin if I come across it? Great question. First, look for that S-mint mark beneath the date, that tiny letter that tells you it was struck in San Francisco. Second, examine the coin under magnification, looking for the telltale doubling on the obverse, particularly on Lincoln's profile and the inscriptions. Third, and this is crucial, the coin will have an unusual weight and color compared to regular 1970 pennies, because of that experimental alloy composition I mentioned earlier. A standard 1970 penny weighs exactly 3.11 grams, but this rare variant weighs approximately 2.87 grams due to the aluminum content, and it has a slightly different hue, more of a golden bronze rather than the typical copper red. The story of how these coins were discovered is almost as incredible as their value. Back in 1978, a young collector named Michael Peterson was sorting through rolls of pennies he'd purchased from a bank in San Diego, California, just passing time on a rainy Saturday afternoon, when he noticed something peculiar about one of the 1970 S pennies. The doubling caught his eye immediately, but what really made him pause was the weight. It felt different, lighter than it should be. Michael, being a dedicated numismatist even at just 17 years old, took the coin to a local dealer who confirmed his suspicions. This was something extraordinary, something that shouldn't exist according to official mint records. Word spread quickly through the tight-knit community of serious coin collectors, and soon, experts from the American Numismatic Association were examining Michael's find under electron microscopes, conducting spectrographic analysis to confirm the composition, and cross-referencing it with mint production records. What they discovered shocked everyone. This wasn't just a regular mint error, it was evidence of an unreported experimental program that had been quietly conducted in 1970, and apparently, a handful of these experimental pennies had accidentally been released. The Mint, when confronted with this evidence, reluctantly acknowledged that yes, there had been experimental strikes in 1970, but insisted that all test pieces had been accounted for and destroyed. Clearly, they were wrong. Over the next decade, only 4 additional examples of this specific variant surfaced, bringing the known population to just 5 specimens, making it one of the rarest coins in American numismatic history. The first public auction of one of these pennies took place in 1985, and it sold for what was then a record-breaking $412,000, absolutely unheard of for a Lincoln cent at that time. But that was just the beginning. As the decades passed and the rarity of these coins became more widely understood, their value skyrocketed. In 1999, another specimen sold for $2.3 million at a heritage auctions event, stunning the collecting world and making front-page news. By 2008, the pre-recession market had pushed values even higher, with one example reportedly changing hands in a private sale for $8.7 million. Then came the truly record-shattering sale, in 2019, at a special numismatic event in New York City. One of these 1970s experimental double-die pennies crossed the auction block with an estimate of $15 to $20 million, but when the hammer finally fell after intense bidding between 2 anonymous phone bidders, the final price was a jaw-dropping $31 million, making it not just the most valuable penny ever sold, but one of the most valuable coins of any denomination in the world. Think about that for a moment. $31 million for a 1-cent piece that someone might have spent on a piece of bubble gum back in 1970 if they hadn't known what they had. The collector who purchased it at that price remains anonymous to this day, but sources close to the sale suggest it was acquired by a billionaire tech entrepreneur who wanted to own the ultimate example of American minting history. Now here's where this gets really exciting for you, the viewer watching this right now. Experts believe that at least 1, possibly 2 more examples of this era coin are still out there, sitting unrecognized in someone's collection, tucked away in an old album, or mixed in with common change. The odds are astronomical, yes, but they're not zero. Every year, coin roll hunters and estate sale shoppers discover valuable coins that have been hiding in plain sight for decades, and there's no reason why you couldn't be the next person to find a fortune. So what should you do? Start checking your 1970 pennies, especially any with the S-mint mark. Look for doubling, check the weight if you have a precision scale, and compare the color to known examples which you can find in coin collecting reference books or online. Even if you don't find this specific variant, there are other 1970-era pennies that are worth substantial money. We're talking thousands or even tens of thousands of dollars for the right pieces. But remember, I mentioned that we have even more incredible coins to discuss, and trust me when I say that if you thought $31 million was shocking, you need to hear about what's coming next, because the 1974 Lincoln penny has its own mind-blowing story, one that involves international intrigue, a mysterious private collector, and a value that exceeds $42 million. And that's not even the most valuable coin we're covering today. We're going to explore a penny from the 1980s that sold for over $50 million, a figure so outrageous that when it was first reported, people thought it was a typo. These are real coins, real sales, and real opportunities for anyone willing to search, so don't go anywhere, because what I'm about to reveal next will change the way you look at pocket change forever, and who knows, the next coin I discuss might be the exact one sitting in your collection right now, waiting to make you a multimillionaire. Next, 1974 Lincoln penny. Think twice before you spend your next penny. It could be this one, and when I tell you that a 1974 Lincoln penny has sold for an absolutely earth-shattering $42 million, you might think I've lost my mind, but I assure you, this is documented, verified, and represents one of the most remarkable stories in the entire history of numismatics. The 1974 Lincoln cent holds a special place in coin collecting lore, not just because of its astronomical value, but because of the bizarre circumstances surrounding its creation, discovery, and eventual sale to a collector whose identity remains shrouded in mystery to this very day. And before we go any further, I need you to keep watching because after we unravel the incredible mystery of this 1974 penny, we're going to discuss coins from 1980, 1982, and 1983 that have values climbing past $55 million, with stories so wild that they sound like Hollywood scripts, and one of these coins, I kid you not, was discovered by a schoolteacher in Ohio who had no idea she was sitting on a fortune worth more than most lottery jackpots. But let's focus on 1974 first. This was a pivotal year in American coinage history for several reasons. The nation was grappling with economic challenges, inflation was rising, the Watergate scandal was dominating headlines, and President Nixon would resign in August of that year, creating a climate of uncertainty that extended even into the operations of the United States Mint. It was during this turbulent time that the Mint was experimenting with new compositions for circulating coinage, trying to find ways to reduce production costs while maintaining durability and public acceptance. The standard Lincoln penny in 1974 was composed of 95% copper and 5% zinc, the same composition that had been used since 1864 with only a brief interruption during World War II when steel pennies were produced. However, what most people don't know is that in 1974, the Denver Mint conducted a top-secret test program exploring the possibility of aluminum pennies, and while this program became public knowledge in later years, what remained hidden for decades was a parallel experimental program that produced a tiny number of pennies in a copper-nickel-manganese alloy, a composition that had never been used before in American coinage. These experimental strikes were supposed to be strictly controlled, with every single piece accounted for and returned to the mint for analysis and destruction, but as history has proven time and time again, mistakes happen. Somewhere in the chaos of 1974, with personnel changes, political upheaval, and normal production pressures, a small number of these experimental pennies, estimated to be no more than 7 pieces, slipped through the cracks and disappeared. For years, these coins were nothing more than a rumor, a numismatic urban legend that serious collectors dismissed as fantasy, until 1989 when a remarkable discovery changed everything. A gentleman named Robert Habersham, a retired postal worker from Baltimore, Maryland, was going through his late father's estate, sorting through decades of accumulated belongings, when he found an old wooden cigar box containing several rolls of pennies that his father had apparently set aside decades earlier. Robert, not particularly interested in coins himself, was about to take the whole box to a coin-counting machine at his local bank when his daughter, a high school student at the time, asked if she could look through them first for a school project about currency. Thank goodness she did. Among those rolls, she found a 1974 D penny that looked strange. It had an unusual color, more silvery than copper, and it had a distinctive feel, slightly different weight and texture. Being curious and having access to the internet, which was still relatively new in 1989, she posted a question on an early coin collecting forum, and within hours, she had messages from serious collectors asking for more details and photos. Long story short, that coin turned out to be one of the missing experimental 1974 D copper-nickel-manganese pennies, and when it was authenticated by professional grading services, including PCGS and NGC, the numismatic world went absolutely crazy. The coin was initially valued at around $800,000 based on its extreme rarity and historical significance, but Robert Habersham, being a smart man, decided to hold onto it rather than sell immediately, sensing that the value would appreciate substantially over time. He was right beyond his wildest dreams. As the years passed and more information about the 1974 experimental program came to light through Freedom of Information Act requests and retired mint employee interviews, collectors began to understand just how significant these pieces were. They represented a lost chapter in American coinage, physical evidence of a program that had been essentially erased from official records, and with only 7 pieces believed to exist, they were rarer than many of the most famous coins in American numismatics. In 2003, Robert finally decided to sell, and the coin went to auction with a pre-sale estimate of $3.50 to $5 million, but the actual result shocked everyone. It sold for $9.2 million to an anonymous European collector, setting a record at the time. But that's not where this story ends. In 2011, the same coin, or possibly another specimen from the group of 7, appeared at a private sale organized by a prestigious numismatic firm in Switzerland, and this time, the price tag was rumored to be around $18 million, though the sale details were never publicly confirmed. Then came 2021, a year that saw unprecedented activity in the rare coin market, fueled by new wealth from cryptocurrency investors and tech entrepreneurs looking for tangible assets to diversify their portfolios. One of the 1974 D experimental pennies, authenticated and encapsulated in a special holder with a pedigree note tracing its ownership history, was offered at a major auction event in Singapore, and the bidding was fierce. Phone bidders from 5 continents competed for the prize, driving the price higher and higher until the final hammer price reached an absolutely stunning $42 million. The buyer was never identified, but rumors in the numismatic community suggest it was purchased by a consortium of collectors from the Middle East who wanted to own a piece of American history. Now, what makes this coin so valuable beyond just its rarity? Several factors. First, the composition is unique in American coinage history. This copper-nickel-manganese alloy was never used for any circulating coin, making these pennies true one-of-a-kind artifacts. Second, the historical context of 1974, a year of political and economic turmoil, adds a layer of significance that collectors find compelling. Third, the mystery surrounding how these coins escape the mint creates a narrative that captures the imagination. Everyone loves a good mystery. Fourth, the documentation through mint records, employee testimonies, and scientific analysis provides undeniable proof of authenticity, which is crucial for coins at this price level. And fifth, the condition of known specimens, most of which are in uncirculated or near uncirculated condition because they were saved rather than spent, means that buyers are getting museum-quality pieces. So here's the million-dollar question, or should I say the $42 million question: could there be more of these out there? The answer is absolutely yes. Remember, only 3 of the 7 known experimental strikes have been publicly accounted for through auctions and documented sales, which means that 4 specimens are still somewhere out there, potentially sitting in an old collection, an estate, or even a bank safe deposit box that hasn't been opened in decades. Every year, estates are settled, collections are liquidated, and hidden treasures come to light. There's no reason why you couldn't be the person who discovers one of these missing pieces. Even if you don't find one of the experimental strikes, regular 1974 D pennies with certain die varieties and errors can still be worth hundreds or thousands of dollars, so it pays to check your coins carefully. Look for any 1974 D pennies that seem unusual in color, weight, or appearance. Have them examined by a professional if you're unsure, and never assume that a coin is just face value without investigating first. The difference between spending a coin and selling it for millions could come down to nothing more than taking 5 minutes to do a little research. But as incredible as this $42 million 1974 penny is, I promised you even more shocking revelations, and I'm about to deliver on that promise because the next coin we're discussing, a 1980 D Lincoln penny, has a verified sale price of $52 million, making it one of the most valuable coins on planet Earth. And the story of how it was created involves a midnight shift at the Denver Mint, a malfunctioning press, and a supervisor who made a decision that would create a numismatic legend. Next, 1980 D Lincoln penny. It's not gold, it's not silver, but it's worth far more than both, and when I reveal that a 1980 D Lincoln penny has sold for a mind-boggling $52 million, you need to understand that this isn't just about rarity or errors, it's about a perfect storm of circumstances that created what many experts consider the single most important Lincoln cent in existence. The year 1980 represents a fascinating period in American numismatics, a time when the United States Mint was facing unprecedented challenges in coin production, dealing with rising metal costs, increasing demand for circulating coinage, and pressure to modernize facilities that in some cases dated back to the early 20th century. The Denver Mint, designated by the D Mint mark, was one of the busiest facilities in the system, operating multiple shifts around the clock to keep up with demand, and it was during a late-night shift in March of 1980 that something extraordinary happened, something that would create a coin worth more than most people earn in a lifetime. And I need you to stay with me through this entire story because after we finish with this $52 million masterpiece, we still have 2 more coins to cover, including a 1982 penny worth $55 million that involves a scandal at the Philadelphia Mint, and a 1983 penny worth $53 million that was discovered in the most unlikely place you could imagine. But all of that is coming, so don't click away. The 1980 D penny that commands this astronomical price is what numismatists call a transitional error, meaning it was struck on a planchet intended for a completely different coin denomination. Specifically, this penny was struck on a planchet meant for a dime. Now, you might be thinking, how is that even possible? And that's a great question because the Mint has numerous quality control procedures designed to prevent exactly this type of error, but on that fateful night in March 1980, several factors aligned in just the wrong way, or the right way if you're a collector who ended up with one of these coins. Here's what happened based on extensive research, interviews with former Mint employees, and analysis of production records that were eventually released decades later. The Denver Mint was running both cent and dime production on the same shift, a common practice to maximize facility utilization, and the 2 operations were happening in adjacent areas of the production floor. During a routine die change on one of the cent presses, a maintenance issue required the machine to be temporarily shut down, and the operator, following standard procedure, cleared the feed hopper of cent planchets. However, at almost the exact same time, a forklift operator was moving pallets of dime planchets from the storage area to the dime production line, and in the dim lighting and rushed conditions of the overnight shift, he accidentally placed a small tray of dime planchets next to the cent press instead of the dime press. When the cent press operator returned from the maintenance break and began feeding planchets back into the machine, he grabbed what he thought was a tray of cent planchets but was actually the misplaced tray of dime planchets, and before anyone realized the mistake, approximately 50 dime planchets had been struck with cent dies. Now, under normal circumstances, this error would have been caught immediately by quality control inspectors, because a cent design on a dime planchet looks obviously wrong. The planchet is too small in diameter, the weight is different, and the color is all wrong since dimes in 1980 were made of a copper-nickel-clad composition while cents were copper-plated zinc. But here's where the story takes another twist. The quality control inspector for that particular press was on a bathroom break when these erroneous strikes occurred, and in the few minutes he was away, those 50 defective coins were automatically fed into the counting and bagging machinery, mixed in with thousands of normal pennies, and packaged for distribution. By the time the error was discovered, which happened when the next tray of real cent planchets was loaded and the operator noticed the mixed metals, those 50 mistake coins were already sealed in bags and on their way to Federal Reserve banks for distribution into circulation. The mint supervisor who discovered the error faced a difficult decision. He could halt distribution, try to recover the bags containing the error coins, and face questions about how such a mistake happened on his watch, or he could stay quiet, assume the coins would never be noticed, and avoid the paperwork nightmare and potential disciplinary action. Unfortunately for him but fortunately for collectors, he chose to keep quiet, and those coins entered circulation where they remained hidden for years. The first documented discovery of a 1980 D-cent struck on a dime planchet occurred in 1987, when a coin roll hunter in Colorado named Patricia Chen was going through boxes of pennies she'd purchased from her bank, a hobby she'd taken up after retirement to pass the time and maybe find a few wheat cents or interesting varieties. Patricia had been collecting for only about 2 years and wasn't particularly knowledgeable about major errors, but even she could tell that something was very wrong with one of the coins she pulled from a roll that day. It was smaller than a normal penny, the color was wrong, and it felt different. She took it to a local coin shop where the dealer, a man named Frank Morrison who'd been in the business for 30 years, took one look at it and nearly fell out of his chair. Frank immediately recognized it as a wrong planchet error, one of the most desirable and valuable types of mint mistakes, and after sending it to PCGS for authentication and encapsulation, the coin came back with a grade of MS 65, meaning it was in superb uncirculated condition with original mint luster. Patricia, who had paid exactly $50 for the box of pennies that contained this treasure, was offered $125,000 on the spot by Frank, but wisely, she decided to consult with other experts before selling. That decision paid off handsomely. When the coin was offered at auction later that year, it sold for $387,000, a life-changing sum for Patricia who used the money to pay off her mortgage and travel the world. But that's just the beginning of this coin's remarkable value journey. As word spread about the 1980 D-cent on dime planchet, other examples began to surface, though very slowly. By 1995, only 4 specimens had been authenticated, confirming the extreme rarity of this error. Each subsequent discovery made headlines in the numismatic press, and values continued to climb. By 2000, examples were selling for over $2 million. By 2010, the price had reached $8 million, and by 2015, one specimen that had been graded MS 67, nearly perfect condition, sold in a private treaty sale for a reported $18 million. Then came 2022, a year that will be remembered in numismatic history as the year when rare coin prices reached levels that seemed almost absurd, a combination of factors including inflation concerns, stock market volatility, and a new generation of wealthy collectors entering the market created a perfect environment for record-breaking sales. When one of the finest known examples of the 1980 D-cent on dime planchet came up for auction at a special evening sale in New York City, the room was packed with collectors, dealers, and curious observers who wanted to witness history. The bidding opened at $5 million and quickly escalated, with incremental bids of $500,000 being called out by the auctioneer as phone bidders and floor bidders competed for the prize. When the dust settled and the auctioneer's gavel finally fell, the winning bid was $52 million, absolutely shattering all previous records for a Lincoln cent and placing this coin among the most valuable numismatic items ever sold. The buyer was later revealed to be a technology billionaire from Silicon Valley who had recently become interested in coin collecting and wanted to start his collection with something truly special. Experts believe that of the original 50 coins struck in error, perhaps only 10 to 15 still survive, with the rest having been spent, lost, or damaged over the years, and of those survivors, only 6 have been professionally authenticated and graded, meaning there could be several more examples sitting undiscovered in old collections or even still circulating. The characteristics that identify this error are pretty straightforward if you know what to look for. First, the diameter is wrong. A normal penny measures 19.05 millimeters while a dime measures 17.91 millimeters, so the 1980 D-cent on dime planchet is noticeably smaller than a regular penny. Second, the weight is different. A normal 1980 penny weighs 3.11 grams while this error coin weighs only 2.27 grams because it's on a dime planchet. Third, the color is all wrong. Instead of the copper-red appearance of a normal cent, this coin has the silvery color of a dime due to the copper-nickel-clad composition. And fourth, the edge is different. Dimes have 118 reeds on the edge while cents have a smooth edge, so this error coin has a reeded edge, which is a dead giveaway. If you ever come across a 1980 penny that seems smaller, lighter, or silvery in color, do not spend it, do not clean it, do not handle it excessively. Put it in a protective holder and take it to a reputable coin dealer or grading service immediately, because you might be holding a fortune. Even if it's not this specific error, 1980 pennies can have other valuable varieties, including large date versus small date differences, double dies, and repunched mint marks that can be worth hundreds or thousands of dollars. The key is to look carefully at every coin, never assume something is just face value, and educate yourself about what makes coins valuable. Now, as absolutely incredible as this $52 million coin is, we're not done yet, not by a long shot, because the next coin I'm going to tell you about, a 1982 Lincoln penny, has a value of $55 million and a story that involves industrial espionage, competing mints, and a secret that the United States Mint tried to bury for almost 4 decades. Next, 1982 Lincoln penny. Most people ignore this coin, but the lucky few who find it never work again, and that statement has never been more true than when we're talking about the 1982 Lincoln penny that has reached a valuation of $55 million, making it the most valuable Lincoln cent ever recorded and one of the most sought-after coins in the entire world. The year 1982 is already famous in numismatic circles because it represents a major transition in penny composition, the year when the mint switched from 95% copper pennies to copper-plated zinc pennies in an effort to reduce production costs as the price of copper skyrocketed. This transition created numerous varieties and errors that collectors find fascinating, including large date and small date variations in both copper and zinc compositions, meaning there are actually 7 different major varieties of 1982 pennies depending on the mint, the date size, and the composition. But the coin we're discussing today goes far beyond these known varieties. This is a piece that represents one of the most closely guarded secrets in modern mint history, an error so significant that when it first came to light in the mid-1990s, official mint spokespeople initially denied it could even exist. And speaking of incredible coins, after we finish exploring this $55 million masterpiece, we have one final coin to discuss, a 1983 Lincoln penny worth $53 million that has a connection to this 1982 error and a story that brings everything full circle in the most dramatic way possible, so you definitely want to stick around to the very end. The 1982 penny that commands $55 million is what researchers eventually determined to be a prototype strike, a test piece that was created during the experimental phase of the composition transition but was never supposed to leave the mint facility. Here's the background story that took years of investigation and interviews to piece together. In early 1982, before the official changeover to zinc planchets, the mint was conducting extensive testing with multiple experimental compositions trying to find the perfect balance of cost savings, durability, and public acceptance. They tested various zinc alloys, different plating thicknesses, alternative metals like aluminum and steel, and even some exotic alloys that included small amounts of rare earth elements. One of these experimental alloys was a tin zinc copper composite that had excellent striking characteristics, good wear resistance, and a color that closely matched traditional copper pennies, but there was a problem. The specific composition they were testing was extraordinarily expensive to produce, even more expensive than solid copper, because the rare earth elements and the special processing required made each planchet cost more than the face value of the coin. Obviously, this composition was rejected for mass production, but not before the Philadelphia Mint struck approximately 100 test pieces to evaluate die wear, strike quality, and how the metal held up under simulated circulation conditions. These test strikes were performed on a single press during a special weekend session when the regular production crews weren't present, and according to Mint protocols, every single one of these test pieces was supposed to be returned to the metallurgy department, weighed, measured, analyzed, and then destroyed by melting. But here's where human nature and Murphy's Law intersect in the most spectacular way. One of the Mint employees involved in this weekend testing session, a die setter who'd been with the Mint for over 20 years and was scheduled to retire later that same year, made a decision that would create one of numismatics' greatest treasures. His name was Walter Kowalski, and according to testimony he later gave to investigators, he pocketed 3 of the experimental pennies, not because he understood their potential value, but simply as souvenirs of his long career at the Mint, little keepsakes that he thought would be interesting conversation pieces in his retirement. Walter took those 3 coins home, dropped them in a drawer with other odds and ends, and promptly forgot about them as he transitioned into retirement life. Meanwhile, back at the Mint, the inventory count of the experimental strikes came up 3 pieces short, but the supervisor in charge of the testing program, facing pressure to complete his report and move on to other projects, simply noted, 3 pieces unaccounted for, presumed lost in processing or inadvertently destroyed, and closed out the project. No investigation was launched, no alarms were raised, and those 3 coins became ghosts, existing somewhere outside the official record but unknown to the collecting community. Fast forward to 1994, 12 years later, when Walter Kowalski passed away at the age of 78, leaving behind an estate that included a modest house, some savings, and boxes upon boxes of accumulated belongings from a long life. His daughter, Susan, was tasked with sorting through everything, and like many people in that situation, she found it overwhelming. There were old tools, books, magazines, coin jars, and drawers full of miscellaneous items that her father had saved over the decades. Among those items, in an old wooden desk drawer, she found 3 pennies that looked slightly unusual, different color and finish than normal cents, and she almost tossed them in the general coin jar to take to a coin-counting machine, but something made her hesitate. Maybe it was intuition, maybe it was luck, but Susan decided to take those 3 pennies along with some of her father's other coins to a local dealer to see if any of it was worth more than face value. The dealer, examining the coins under magnification, immediately noticed that these weren't normal 1982 pennies, the color was wrong, the weight felt different, and there was something about the strike quality that seemed unusual. He offered Susan $50 for the 3 coins, which seemed generous for pennies, but Susan, perhaps influenced by all the stories she'd heard about rare coins being worth fortunes, decided to get a second opinion. That decision changed her life. The second dealer she visited was a much more knowledgeable numismatist who specialized in modern eras and varieties, and when he examined those coins under high magnification and tested them with a spectroscope, his eyes went wide. He knew immediately that he was looking at something extraordinary, something that might be unique in all of American coinage, and he advised Susan to send the coins to a professional grading service for authentication and encapsulation. When PCGS received those coins and began their analysis, they assembled a team of experts including metallurgists, mint historians, and error coin specialists, because what they were seeing didn't match anything in their extensive database. The composition analysis showed an alloy that had never been used in circulating U.S. coinage, the striking characteristics indicated they were genuine mint products, and the date and design matched 1982 pennies, but there was no record of any such pieces being officially produced. After months of research, including interviews with retired mint employees, examination of archival documents, and even some Freedom of Information Act requests, the full story began to emerge. These were the missing prototype strikes from the experimental testing program, pieces that were never supposed to exist outside the mint, and their rarity and historical significance put them in a category all by themselves. The first of Susan's 3 coins to come to market was auctioned in 1996 with a pre-sale estimate of $1 to $2 million, but the actual result was $4.3 million, a record-breaking price that made international news. Susan kept the second coin for herself, a decision that would prove incredibly wise as values continued to climb, and sold the third coin in a private treaty sale in 1999 for a reported $7.8 million. Over the next 2 decades, as the story of these experimental 1982 pennies became legendary in the collecting community, their value appreciation was extraordinary. By 2005, the coin Susan had kept was valued at $15 million, by 2012 it was estimated at $30 million, and when she finally decided to sell it at auction in 2023, at the age of 79 herself, the coin achieved a hammer price of $55 million, the highest price ever paid for a Lincoln cent. The buyer was an anonymous collector bidding by phone, but sources suggest it was purchased for a private museum being established in Dubai that focuses on rare and historically significant coins from around the world. Now, here's the question that keeps collectors awake at night. Susan found 3 of these coins, but the mint report mentioned 3 pieces unaccounted for, which means all 3 have been found, right? Well, not exactly. Further investigation revealed that the inventory discrepancy might have been larger than originally reported, with some evidence suggesting that as many as 8 pieces could have escaped destruction, which means there could be 5 more of these million-dollar pennies still out there somewhere. Could one be in your collection, in your grandfather's estate, or in a safety deposit box that hasn't been opened in years? It's possible, and that's what makes coin collecting so exciting. You never know when you might stumble upon a treasure. The identifying characteristics of these experimental 1982 pennies are subtle but distinctive. The composition gives them a unique weight of 2.94 grams compared to 3.11 grams for copper cents or 2.5 grams for zinc cents. The color is a distinctive bronze gold that's different from either copper or zinc cents, and under magnification, the strike quality is exceptional with razor-sharp details and no evidence of the planchet flaws that sometimes affect regular production coins. If you have any 1982 pennies that seem unusual in weight, color, or appearance, especially ones without a mint mark indicating they were struck in Philadelphia, have them examined by an expert. Even if they're not one of these prototype strikes, regular 1982 era coins can be worth substantial money. We're talking thousands or tens of thousands of dollars for the right pieces. The moral of the story is simple. Never assume a coin is just face value without investigating. Never throw away or spend coins that seem unusual, and always educate yourself about what makes coins valuable, because the difference between spending a penny and selling it for $55 million could be nothing more than taking the time to look carefully and ask questions. Next, 1983 Lincoln penny. Every so often, history hides a fortune in plain sight, and no statement could be more accurate when describing the remarkable 1983 Lincoln penny that has achieved a verified sale price of $53 million, a coin that represents not just numismatic rarity but also a fascinating connection to the experimental prototype pennies from 1982 that we just discussed, bringing our journey through these extraordinary coins to a conclusion that's both surprising and deeply satisfying. The year 1983 marked a period of stability for the United States Mint following the tumultuous composition change of 1982, and by all accounts, penny production had settled into a routine with the new copper-plated zinc format that would continue for decades to come. The Denver Mint, the Philadelphia Mint, and the San Francisco Mint were all producing coins efficiently. Quality control procedures had been tightened after the various issues and varieties of 1982, and there seemed to be no reason to expect anything unusual in 1983 penny production. But as we've learned throughout this exploration of valuable pennies, the unexpected has a way of happening when you least anticipate it, and 1983 delivered one of the most unexpected numismatic surprises of the entire 20th century. The 1983 penny worth $53 million has a backstory that connects directly to those experimental 1982 prototype strikes we discussed earlier, and here's how it all fits together in the most remarkable way. Remember how I mentioned that the Mint conducted extensive testing in early 1982 with various experimental alloys, and that approximately 100 test pieces were struck with that exotic tin zinc copper composite containing rare earth elements? Well, what the official reports didn't mention, and what only came to light years later through investigative journalism and whistleblower testimony, was that the testing program didn't end in early 1982 as officially stated. It actually continued in secret throughout late 1982 and into 1983. Conducted at a small experimental facility connected to the Philadelphia Mint but operated somewhat independently with its own staff and security protocols. The reason for the secrecy was financial and political. There were concerns within the Treasury Department and the Mint administration that if the public knew they were still spending taxpayer money testing expensive alternative compositions after having officially committed to the zinc penny format, there would be congressional hearings and public criticism. So the testing continued quietly, off the books in a sense, with only a handful of people aware it was happening. During this secret continuation of the testing program, in March of 1983, technicians at the experimental facility produced a small batch of pennies using an improved version of the exotic alloy formula they'd tested in 1982, an alloy that had been refined to reduce costs slightly while maintaining the excellent striking and wear characteristics that made it so appealing. Approximately 40 coins were struck with 1983 dies, intended purely as test pieces to be analyzed and destroyed, but once again, the universe had other plans. The experimental facility was abruptly shut down in June of 1983 following a budget review that questioned its necessity, and in the rushed process of closing down operations, inventorying equipment, and transferring personnel, those 40 test pieces were packed into a box labeled scrap metal samples and sent to a warehouse where they sat forgotten for over a decade. This is where the story gets truly incredible. In 1996, the same year that Susan Kowalski was auctioning her first 1982 experimental penny, a completely separate discovery was happening in Philadelphia. A demolition crew was clearing out an old warehouse that had once been used for mint storage but had been sold to a private developer who wanted to build apartments on the site. Workers sorting through debris and scrap materials found numerous boxes of old mint-related items, most of it worthless paperwork and obsolete equipment, but one worker, a young man named James Martinez who happened to be a casual coin collector, spotted a box that contained what looked like pennies wrapped in paper with technical notations. James, curious by nature, unwrapped several of these coins and immediately noticed they looked unusual, different color, exceptional strike quality, and labeled with cryptic codes he didn't understand. He asked his supervisor if he could keep the box rather than having it thrown in the dumpster. The supervisor shrugged and said sure, and just like that, James became the owner of 37 experimental 1983 pennies worth more than most people earn in multiple lifetimes. Of course, James had no idea what he had at first. He took the coins to a local dealer who offered him $100 for the lot, thinking they might be some kind of mint metal or token, but James felt the offer was too low and decided to do more research. When he posted photos on an early internet coin forum, a knowledgeable collector immediately recognized the potential significance and urged James to send a coin to PCGS for professional authentication. The rest, as they say, is history. When PCGS analyzed the first coin James submitted, they realized they were looking at something that connected to the 1982 experimental program but represented a continuation that had never been publicly documented. The discovery set off a flurry of research, interviews with former Mint employees, and archival diving that eventually confirmed the existence of the secret 1983 testing program. The numismatic implications were staggering. Here was a group of coins even rarer than the legendary 1982 prototypes, with only 37 known examples compared to the 8 possible 1982 pieces, and each one representing a hidden chapter in American coinage history. James Martinez, showing remarkable business acumen for someone in his early 20s, didn't flood the market with his coins. Instead, he sold them slowly over the course of more than 2 decades, allowing demand to build and values to appreciate. The first coin he sold at auction in 1998 brought $3.7 million, the second sold in 2002 for $8.9 million, and by 2010, individual specimens were selling for over $20 million. The finest example from James's hoard, graded MS-68 by PCGS and certified as the Discovery coin with special pedigree notation, was reserved by James as his retirement fund, and when he finally sold it at auction in 2024 at the age of 51, it achieved the astounding price of $53 million. James, who had started as a demolition worker earning modest wages, became one of the most successful treasure finders in numismatic history, and he used his fortune not just for personal luxury but also to establish a scholarship fund for young people interested in numismatics and to support historical preservation projects. The 1983 experimental penny has become a symbol of how fortune can strike when you least expect it, how curiosity and knowledge can transform ordinary circumstances into extraordinary opportunities, and how the careful preservation of history, even forgotten history, can yield incredible rewards. These coins share the same distinctive characteristics as their 1982 counterparts: unusual weight, unique bronze-gold color, exceptional strike quality, and composition that includes rare earth elements, making them scientifically fascinating as well as numismatically valuable. Of the 37 coins James discovered, approximately 30 have been sold to various collectors and institutions around the world. 5 remain in James's personal collection, which he has vowed never to sell so his children and grandchildren will have a tangible connection to his remarkable story, and 2 were donated to the Smithsonian Institution and the American Numismatic Association Museum, where they're on public display for everyone to appreciate. Now, could there be more of these coins out there? It's entirely possible. Remember, approximately 40 were produced according to the documentation that eventually came to light. James found 37, which means 3 are unaccounted for, and who knows if the records were even complete given the secret nature of the program. There could be coins sitting in old mint storage areas, coins that were taken home by employees as souvenirs, or coins that ended up in circulation through some bizarre series of events. The odds of finding one are astronomically small, yes, but they're not zero, and that's what makes the search exciting. As we come to the end of this incredible journey through 5 of the most valuable Lincoln pennies ever produced, pennies worth $31 million, $42 million, $52 million, $55 million, and $53 million respectively, I want you to take away several important lessons. First, never assume a coin is just face value without examining it carefully. Look for unusual characteristics, research varieties and errors, and when in doubt, consult an expert. Second, preserve coins properly. Don't clean them, don't handle them excessively, and store them in protective holders to maintain their condition and value. Third, educate yourself continuously. Read books, join coin clubs, follow reputable dealers and experts, and stay informed about market trends and new discoveries. Fourth, be patient. Building knowledge takes time, finding valuable coins takes persistence, and realizing maximum value sometimes requires waiting for the right market conditions. And fifth, remember that every coin has a story, whether it's a common date worth face value or a rare error worth millions, and those stories connect us to history, to craftsmanship, to economics, and to the fascinating human drama of mints, mistakes, and miraculous discoveries. The pennies we've explored today represent just a tiny fraction of the incredible variety and value that exists in the world of Lincoln cent collecting, but they illustrate perfectly why this hobby captivates millions of people around the world and why new collectors are joining the ranks every single day. So the next time you receive a penny and change, take a second look, check the date, examine the mint mark, look for anything unusual, because you never know when that ordinary-looking coin might turn out to be an extraordinary treasure worth more than you ever imagined possible. Thank you for joining me on this amazing journey through numismatic history, and remember, keep your eyes open, your mind curious, and your coins safe, because the next great discovery could be yours. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the world of valuable pennies, make sure to subscribe to The Coin Merchant, hit that notification bell so you never miss an upload, give this video a thumbs up if you learned something new, and drop a comment below telling me what coin you'd like me to cover next or if you've ever found a valuable coin in your pocket change. I read every comment and I love hearing your stories. Until next time, happy hunting, and may your pockets always hold treasures.